Okay, honestly, I am not fucking with my eye makeup right now. I tried to do something different, do my waterline black, and I just don't think it matches my face. The contrast doesn't look good on me. I also lightened my hair yesterday a little bit. I mainly done the front pieces, so the back is still kind of the same color as my natural hair, but I did some highlights, at the front. Anyways, I am so excited to do today's video. As you can tell by the title, I'm going to be exposing my own birth chart for the purpose of teaching and just showing you guys how I would interpret a birth chart. But this is more for fun. I mean, astrology right now on the internet it's so huge. There's so many different things that people say. There's so many different methods, especially with like pop astrology and modern astrology. My standpoint is that I wouldn't even say I'm an astrology student. Like I've been learning about astrology for years. I read books, but it's kind of very self-paced, and whenever I feel like doing it, because I'm a uni student as well, and I don't always have time for it. But I would say when I'm doing it for fun, I take on a more traditional standpoint. I just finished reading an introduction into ancient texts. I read On the Heavenly Spheres by, I can't remember who it's by two people, and I'm going to be reading the anthologies soon, so that's kind of me trying to be more traditional. I mean, I'm not going to be using outer planets in this video, and I'm going to be using sect, but anyways, that's just a little disclaimer that this is just completely for fun, and everybody these days honestly practices astrology in different ways. I'm just going to be showing you how I would interpret a chart. So anyways, yeah, so this is going to be very juicy because I'm going to be able to talk about myself and my life, but not in a boring way where I just sit here and tell you guys about my life, because that wouldn't be that cool. Maybe in the future when I'm famous it'll be cool, but instead of just sitting here and talking about myself to that's what I'm going to be doing anyway. I'm going to be talking about myself from the context of my birth chart and how my particular placements manifest in my life. And hopefully, if you have the same placements as me, whether it's just one or two or a few, comment them down below. For example, if you have a Leo Venus as well, or any kind of placement that I do, if you share one with me, please comment down below in your experience with having that placement, or even if you know somebody you like or don't like with that placement, like feel free to whatever, roast in the comments. I don't care. Like, this is literally just for fun, because as we know, astrology is not so scientifically proven, because you could argue that there's scientists who believe in God, so there is a sphere of knowledge that we just simply do not understand and have to take some sort of faith in. I'm not comparing astrology to religion, because that is not what it is. Astrology is simply the study of the correlation between planetary alignments and earthly events. Now, all the jargon out of the way, let's pull up my birth chart. So I'm gonna have it here on my phone. Hold up. I'm gonna have my chart here on my phone, and I'm gonna put it up on my screen so you guys can watch. Just for some context, I'm gonna be using whole sign houses and tropical astrology, tropical zodiac. No particular reason other than the fact that it's what I really only have experience in using. I've looked at sidereal charts. It's just not something I primarily would go to. My go-to would be whole sign houses and whole sign houses and tropical astrology. So let's get to the juicy part. So as you can see in my chart, if I'm going to be looking at my phone here, or looking, it's because I'm just going to put my phone here to the side so I can see my chart. I was born at 1:08 p.m, which makes me a Scorpio rising. Ooh. So if you don't know what the rising sign or the ascendant is, it's essentially, I'm just going to try and keep this as simple as possible. So your rising sign is one of the most personal placements in your birth chart. Maybe I should say what a birth chart is actually. So a birth chart is, if you don't know what a birth chart is, but I'm assuming if you're here you already know, it's a snapshot of the sky at the exact moment of your birth, and things move really quickly in the sky, so that's why it's so important to have your exact birth time. For example, mine is from my birth certificate, which is probably the most reliable, but if you had a relative who was present and can confirm even that your birth certificate is correct, because even birth certificates can probably make mistakes, that would be the best. And especially if you're like me, okay, we'll actually get into that. But yeah, so because things move so quickly in the sky, there are things that move slower and there are things that move quicker in the sky. For example, the moon moves really quickly. It changes signs every 2 to 3 days. Saturn is the slowest moving traditional planet. Saturn changes signs every few years. Depends, sometimes it goes backwards and back and forth with retrograde, but generally speaking, Saturn changes signs every few years. Whereas there's points in your chart, like the rising sign, your rising sign, which change so quickly that if you were born an hour before someone, you're gonna have a completely different setup of a chart than them, which is like, well, how you can counter the argument of twins, that twins born 5 minutes apart can have a completely different chart. Anyways, so yeah, your rising sign is technically the point that was rising, the constellation or the sign that was rising above the eastern horizon at the time of your birth. It is so personal to you that back in the ancient times, when people would come up to you and ask for your sign, they weren't actually asking for your zodiac sign, aka your sun sign. They were asking for your rising sign, because your rising sign is literally your physical body, your identity, how you show up in the world. So that was a little jargon on what your rising sign is, and I'm a Scorpio rising. The stereotype with Scorpio risings is that they're intimidating, that they're intense, they've like a sharp gaze, they like to wear like Scorpio rising is like the emo rising sign of the zodiac, and that's stereotypes, and I see that a lot in Scorpio risings. So some famous Scorpio risings would be Lana Del Rey, I'm pretty sure, Fiona Apple. I'm like losing, like I can't remember what other famous Scorpio rising. Melanie Martinez is a Scorpio rising. I can't think of more off the top of my head, but generally speaking, if I see somebody and I see like they have that unapproachedness to them, even if they're nice people, like I'm a very kind person, but I generally tend to be more quiet when people first meet me. It's kind of like the person you meet where you feel like you're intimidated by them at first, or maybe they're not even intimidated, but maybe they're just a little bit too quiet, you weren't sure. Not that all Scorpio risings are quiet. I mean, Scorpio, at the end of the day, Scorpio is ruled by Mars. When we do talk, it's like assertive, we go for things, but I feel like because Scorpio risings are ruled by Mars and they're the nocturnal Mars ruling of Scorpio, as opposed to Aries risings, which you'll see in Aries rising, they will assert, they will dominate, they will be head first in a group project. Scorpio risings like tend to stay back and not really like assert themselves that much. Like they assert themselves silently without really saying anything, but they're not pushy. Anyways, and I think I should relate this back to my personal life. So yeah, I've like always felt that like I'm a very, very friendly person, and I like being involved in things. I like having like groups of friends. I love doing like group project. I'm not gonna sit here and lie and say that I like group projects, but like, you know, I'm a like relatively social person, although it does become a little bit harder to me. I think it's for that reason. I always worry that people perceive me as like too quiet or intense, and like even your rising sign can like be your physical looks. I mean, I did go through an emo phase where I dyed my hair black for like more than 3 years, and I'm not saying that was necessary, but like yeah, people perceive me quiet intensely, and I think that Scorpio risings, generally speaking, so this is not gonna be like a competition of how like hard your life is based on your rising sign, but when it comes to malefics and benefics, it's a technique in traditional astrology where the planets so there's the luminaries, the sun and the moon, and Mercury are neutral. Well, the luminaries are luminaries, and then Mercury is generally neutral depending on what sign it's in. But there are 2 planets which are benefics and 2 planets which are malefics. And a benefic is a planet that naturally is more positive. I mean, obviously it depends on how it manifests in your chart, but anyways, a malefic essentially are planets that are inherently challenging. And I feel like there are 4 rising signs that are ruled by a malefic, and I do think that being ruled by a malefic does slightly make your life challenging, whether it's, you know, you feel like you don't really fit in, you feel like everywhere you go you somehow bring like conflict with you, or maybe you bring like restrictions with you. So the four rising signs that would be ruled by malefics is obviously Scorpio rising, you're ruled by Mars, which is a lesser malefic. Aries risings are also ruled by Mars, which is also a lesser malefic, and then Capricorn and Aquarius risings are ruled by Saturn, which is the greater malefic. So yeah, I do think if you're ruled by a malefic, depending obviously like where your malefic is, you kind of feel like you're sort of bringing, maybe not trouble in the way that like it's like in violent or bad things happening to you, but more so like a weird discomforted feeling of just like not really like belonging. Anyways, yeah. This was like meant to be like exposing myself, and I am exposing myself. I'm also a 29 degrees Scorpio rising, meaning that if I was born about, I didn't even check, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if I was born 5 minutes later than what my birth certificate says, I would be a Sagittarius rising. And yeah, I don't resonate with a Sagittarius rising at all. I think my birth certificate is definitely correct. If I was a Sagittarius rising, that would completely change like the setup of my chart, meaning that like different things would show up in different areas of my life, which just would not be accurate. But anyways, let's move on from let's go back actually to my time. Let's move on from the Scorpio rising phenomena, and let's see what else is in my chart that's juicy. So my ascendant ruler, which is obviously Mars, Mars represents, traditionally it's like wars, volatility, separation, enemies, aggression. It can also be passion, going for things like head first without really like it's just without second guessing. So it'd be very different to Saturn, and Saturn likes a plan and structure, whereas Mars kind of just goes for it. So I'm ruled by Mars, and I've been told like that sometimes I don't really think before I do things, which I never noticed that in myself. I always thought I'm not really like Mars. Like I don't really resonate with Mars being my like ruler, as in like I do resonate in the sense that like if I do want to do something, I go like very passionately for it, and I like to just like hyper focus on something. But I plan a lot, I think a lot. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm like a Virgo sun. But somebody told me like a few months ago, I was doing something, I think we were shopping, and they were like, I just noticed that you have very like head first, you don't think before you act. And then I started, that stuck in my head, and I started looking at like my behavior, and I thought, kind of, yeah, I don't actually think before I act. I definitely think before I speak, but I don't think I think before I act. Anyways, but off that point, Mars is located in my 8th house, and if you're a modern astrology person, you know that the 8th house is considered very taboo and like scary and like death and occult matters. And in traditional astrology, it was still considered a generally negative house, but it was more to do with finance and other people's money. For example, you know, inheriting a will, or like maybe finally finding a partner, and then as opposed to you just hoarding your own money, you do something like joint, you create a joint bank account. Yeah, so I'd say I'd like mix those two and say like, yeah, the 8th house is pretty taboo and occult, but it's not that taboo and occult in the sense. It's more like so my ruler, my ascendant ruler, my chart ruler, meaning that the birth chart is a map of your life, and so it's not all just about your psyche and your mind in traditional astrology. So my Mars, my ruler, I as a person, as an go-getter, like impulsive person that also struggles and might be separated in a lot of times, I show up in the 8th house of death, debt, other people's money, and the occult. Now, I actually had a reading done by a professional astrologer recently, and they asked me if I do feel like there's a lot of conflict, arguments, like physicality sometimes maybe, or verbal physicality in terms of like sharing resources with other people. And I said, no, I actually struggle because, so basically my the 8th house, the reason why it's considered a bad house is because it doesn't aspect the rising sign, the ascendant. So the rising sign is like the sign of, the first house is the house of you, your body. It's where your ascendant is in whole sign houses. It's literally the house of you in like the most literal way possible. And it's an angular house. You can just Google that, like, this is not, you know, gonna be like a tutorial or like a whatever. Essentially what I'm trying to say is that the 8th house is the reason why the 8th house is considered not so good of a house is also, one of the reasons is because it doesn't, there's more reasons, but one of the reasons is because it doesn't make a direct aspect. It doesn't see the first house. And if a house can't see like your ascendant, it can't see who you are, you yourself may struggle to literally see the themes of that house play out in your life. And my ascendant ruler being there, there's kind of a sense of like, I don't really know, like I need to kind of dig deeper to see what I'm doing like behind the scenes. Like that's why I gravitate towards a lot of shadow work, because I like feel like if I haven't done shadow work in a couple of days, I don't know who I am. Like I'm scared that there's like stuff brewing under the surface that will come out in a way that shouldn't come out. So I'm very like aware of things about myself. But anyways, yeah, so my the person that I was getting astrology reading with asked me, he's like, do you you know, do you see that conflict with other people's money? And I told him, I mean, I don't really know. I guess like with the occult matters, but I don't think I've lived long enough on the planet to like have merged resources with somebody, you know what I mean? Like that's kind of more of a life partner marriage thing down the line, like when you're buying property. So while like yes, growing up, I mean like me and my sister, I love my sister, like we're like close, but we also do like argue a lot about like, you know, I mean, I think it's just like regular sibling arguments, as in like you took my top, well you took my thing, this is mine, this is yours. I mean, I know siblings are in the 3rd house, but I guess like my family are the only people that I've been with for so long, obviously, like I'm like that I've shared resources with them. And my 8th house is ruled by Gemini. Sorry, it's ruled by Mercury. Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury, and my Mercury is once again quite hidden. It's in the 12th house. So Mercury is the planet of communication, speech, in the Venusian sign of Libra, in the 12th house, which would link my identity, my physicality, like aggression and kind of like issues and like head first like projects in terms of other people's money, and then also like more kind of like hidden away things. So I think once again that like really confirms the fact that I don't really experience 8th house things on a day-to-day life, like in broad daylight, just because the 8th house is hidden. My 8th house ruler is in a house of solitude. So yeah, like I don't really have much to say about the 8th house as a house of other people's money. I mean, I'm only 18, I've only ever really either relied on like a parent's money or like some money that I made myself. So yeah, that's the position of my 8th house ruler. Now, I feel like this is so personal, like sharing on the internet, because like I know some celebrities like don't even share their birth times, but who cares? Okay, right, I don't know what we should move on to next. Maybe we'll just follow sect. So the sect is, I don't know if I'm gonna go into detail like explaining what sect is. That might be like a separate video. Maybe we should move on to the most positive aspect of my chart, without a doubt. Okay, so lucky for me, I have an incredibly placed Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is the greater benefic, meaning that if you're born during the day, Jupiter is your most positive planet. It brings you expansion, wisdom. It's maybe like a philosophical expansion, monetary expansion, having a mentor that taught you something really important, traveling, just like expanding your horizons essentially. Obviously depends on where it is in your chart. So my Jupiter, if you're born in like the same month or year than me, you probably actually also have Jupiter in domicile, meaning that it's in its ruling sign of Sagittarius, which is a really good thing. Like no matter where it's placed, if you have a Jupiter in domicile and you're born during the day, or sorry, yeah, if you have a Jupiter in domicile, so either Pisces or Sagittarius, and you were born during the day, that is going to be your most positive placement. And it's in my 2nd house of money, literally. 2nd house is, so like I said, the 8th house is the kind of the like shared money with other people and investments and merging. But the 2nd house is your money. It's the closest to your ascendant, so it's like your immediate assets, like the phone that you're holding in your hand, like what's like currently in your bank account, just like throughout your life, the immediate assets and money that you're going to possess. And Jupiter is a planet of good luck. So yeah, having Jupiter in my 2nd house it also means that the ruler of my, sometimes when you want to connect themes between houses, so you want to see, well, like, okay, sure, like I have Venus in my second house, but like how am I going to make that money? You would look where Venus is in your chart for more context. So for me, I don't have to look at more context. Where my money is ruled by a planet that is in the second house. So essentially, basically, like whenever I'm going to be making money in the future, my chart says that it's going to be like very self-providing. When I'm going to be looking for resources, I'm going to go to myself. I'm going to be providing for myself. And also my 5th house is ruled by Jupiter. My 5th house is ruled by Jupiter. My 5th house is in Pisces, which is another sign that rules over Jupiter. So I guess we can also connect the themes for me of my 2nd and 5th house, which is nice. 5th house is a really nice house. If you have a lot of 5th house placements, or like your rising sign rulers in the 5th house, like consider yourself quite lucky. It's a nice house of creativity, art, children, and pleasure. Essentially, it's like making your money, and then if you're somebody who like, oh, I love to make money just so like I can leisure, I can like chill, and yeah, so the 5th house is very nice. It's essentially the house of creativity, joy, children, and sex. So my 2nd house and my 5th house being connected is pretty good, because not only do I generally tend to have good luck with money, it is also linked with 5th house themes of creativity and joy. So just like, I got my reading done by an astrologer, and he told me, you know, like he was like, do you make art or something like that? Because I see like you would make money from art, also because I have a 10th house Leo Venus, and I actually told him yes, like I do make art. Anyways, so that would be like my money things. So that was like the most positive placement in my chart. Although when let's look at aspects, I actually don't have any aspects. Like my Jupiter is just like unafflicted there in the 2nd house in domicile, which is very nice. That's like really the only like inherently positive, in my opinion, thing in my chart. I mean, I guess it could lead to like overindulgence and feeling a bit too comfortable in your boots, but I mean, nothing's like always gonna be good. I guess we can move on to my 10th house. I'm like not going in any order right now. I'm literally just going what I feel like talking about. Oopsies. Now let's move on to my 10th house. Why? Because I have a 10th house is also a positive house. Remember I said about the angular houses? So the first house, the angular houses are in traditional astrology the more positive houses, because I actually don't really know why, guys, but I know that it's because they're, other than the first house, they're all making a positive aspect to the first house. 10th house is an angular house that is to do with, nowadays it's more to do with just like career and what would be your best career prospectus. And yeah, in traditional astrology, I'm pretty sure the 10th house is more to do with like authority and like how you were viewed in like a place like of authority, or essentially how authority dealt with you and how you dealt with authority. I feel like I'm repeating myself right now, but essentially for simplicity, the 10th house is the house of career, and it's also where for a lot of, it's called the midheaven, which is the most visible point. It's the highest point in the sky. So while I said that like when people first meet you they'll see your rising sign, but when they kind of look at your place in society, they're kind of seeing more the midheaven. So I have Venus in my 10th house. Venus is a greater benefic. So Venus is a lesser benefic. So it's not as grandiose and wealthy as Jupiter, as big back Jupiter, but it's still a very nice, positive planet that likes to bring harmony, it likes to bring love. I mean, Venus is associated with love, beautiful things, art, aesthetics, softer tone of voice, which I'm putting on right now. But anyways, yeah, so I have Venus in my 10th house, which is a nice house for career and authority. Generally speaking, people see that. It also makes my 10th house ruled by the sun, which is also in my 11th house, which is a house of social networking. Just like a nice little sprinkle. I'd say Venus is like, whenever because I have an art page, guys, that I run, and whenever I think of like how people see me as an artist, I always like to think of Venus in my 10th house, because I like to create things that are nice to look at not like, I'm not somebody who ties art heavily, at least my own art. I mean, I love looking at art through the perspective of like art history and art interpretation and art commentary, and looking at art through like a socialistic lens. But when it comes to creating my own art, I just like to do things solely for the pleasure of somebody else's eye. I like that people look at my work and think, this is really pretty, this makes me feel nice, this gives me a break from whatever monotonous thing I was doing before I looked at this. So that's kind of, yeah, that's like a Venus. I mean, I guess, like, I like having my hair done pretty. It's ruled by Leo. Leo is a lion. Leo is Maine. I mean, it can make me come off a little bit too, like, I don't think I'm egotistic at all, actually. I think I'm pretty humble, so that's my 10th house. Maybe I should give some experiences in my life of when my 7th house, so 7th house is the house of relationships and other people, but not like, so the 5th house, this is like, if we were to get into love, which is like, the 5th house would be, like I said, pleasure, so it would deal more with like situationships and flings and like casual things, and dates, like chronic dating would kind of be in the 5th house, but the 7th house is opposite to the ascendant, so it's like other people who you have an eye on for a long time, who you have a genuine relationship with. It doesn't have to be romantic, it can be a very close lifelong best friend, or it could be a business partner that you have been working on and for such a long time and building something strong. So my 7th house, so other people that are close to me, is ruled by Venus, the planet of love. So essentially it just means that my career and like meeting people, I guess, meeting new people that I will form long-term bonds with, like I said, does not have to be romantic, will probably generally be in a space of career, in a space of authority, a career. Venus relates to like art, pretty things, creativity, yeah, kind of. Haven't seen a lot of that in my life come up yet, but I feel like I remember when I got my astrology reading and like there's so many things I resonated with, but a lot of time he was like, you know, like I can't really ask you how you've experienced like this, because, you know, like you're like 18, and I was like, yeah. But it's cool to see how my life will unfold. Like I feel like I wonder if I go back to this video in like 5 or 10 years and I think like, wow, like this really played out. I actually might do that if I keep posting on YouTube in like 5 or 10 years. I'll do like a reaction videos to this. Okay, that was my Venus. I think my Venus is also not aspecting anything. She's just there. I know that if I bring outer planets into the picture, then like my Venus is doing some things, but like generally speaking, she's not. Okay, now let's move on to my 11th house. Is pretty jam-packed. So the 11th house is the house of groups of people, whether it's friendship groups, being in a political party, being in just like a group, like an interest group that like goes for the same values, or like works like to accomplish the same goals. It can be an interest group, it can be, like I said, a friendship group, or simply the act of social networking at a party. So in my 11th house is ruled by Virgo, which is a mercurial sign that is often associated with like perfectionality, etc. But I have my sun in my midheaven conjunct in my 11th house, which makes me very prominent in network. It sounds like I'm just boasting, but like I don't even mean like this in a good way. I generally have a phenomenon where I'm in a friendship group throughout my life, even if I feel a bit lonely with Saturn being there. But I like, even if I feel completely lonely, I like to be a part of something that feels bigger than just myself and an individualistic cause, which I guess is kind of why I'm interested in like politics. I'm studying politics in college. Yeah, so that's pretty much my 11th house. I have my Saturn there, which is a planet of, generally speaking, it's a malefic of restrictions, imposing like limiting rigid structures and like not so good things. So I do feel like I experience a lot of isolation, as in I feel isolated, even friendship groups sometimes, like not necessarily, nobody's ever doing anything to me, but I just feel like a little bit standoffish, and I feel like, I don't know if I like how people are perceiving me, or like there's sort of an aura of distance. I don't think I think like everybody, I've experienced like exclusions from like groups growing up. Maybe that's Saturn, or maybe that's just everybody felt that way. And then my last placement that I forgot my moon. My moon is in Aquarius in my 4th house. So my moon is ruled by Saturn, which is obviously the moon is about kind of emotions and things. Sense of comfort, how you get comfortable, how you react to things. Your mother, how you were nurtured by others growing up, or yeah, so generally, like, to simplify it, I'd say emotional states, mother, nurturing, and the moon in, for example, horary astrology can also represent groups of people. So I guess maybe in the personal sense, the moon can represent your sense of community in your life. So I have the moon in Aquarius, meaning that my moon is ruled by Saturn, and as we know, the moon is about emotions, Saturn is about logic, restriction. I feel like so the moon is about emotions and Saturn is about limitations, logic, and kind of the opposite of what the moon does. So there is a sense of friction and there's a sense of over rationalizing my emotions, trying to view how I'm doing from like a third person perspective rather than actually allowing myself to feel my emotions. Like I remember a lot of the times for years I was like afraid of not even conflict, I was afraid to have vulnerable conversations with friends about, like, if something was bothering my friends and they wanted to talk to me, I would just like go into a straight, I would just like think to myself, I don't want to show vulnerability, I'm just gonna, you know, put on like a stoic face, like apologize, do whatever I need to do, but I'm not gonna like tell them how I feel. I didn't want to be vulnerable, and that's that Aquarius moon. If you're also a Capricorn moon, you probably might relate to me because you're also ruled by Saturn. So like getting comfortable is a little bit harder for us, but luckily for me, it's like my moon is in my 4th house, which is home life, property, foundations. So while I do have that like sense of disattachment from my emotions, why did I just turn into a British accent? That disattachment of emotions, when I do have to like resort to emotional vulnerability, trying to find comfort, I like doing that in a home, and I do have like emotional ties to I do have a lot of emotional ties to growing up and how I am today. And I guess Aquarius moons have a thing where they don't feel as like in touch with either their own maternal side, or they genuinely don't feel in touch with their mother, or there was a sense of distance and like emotional from like a mother figure. It doesn't have to be like your mother, can be the replacement of your mother figure, or not necessarily a replacement, but you know, who was supposed to be your mother figure. So yeah, that is going to be the end of the video. This was just like a very quick run through some of my placements, exposing my birth chart so you guys could see how I look at things like that. And yes, so thank you so much for watching. If you have any specific questions or would like to make a very particular video about anything specific, comment down below. And also, if you share any of the same placements as me, please let me know your experience with having that placement. Anything the same as me, anything different, I would love to see your perspective. So see you in the next video. Bye bye, and don't forget to like and subscribe.